Greetings everyone, my name is Rudolph Richards and I'm a student at the American Military University and a part of the class Conflict Analysis and Resolution, and the purpose of today's presentation is to analyze the Chechen crisis and the importance of reconciliation and peace building within the international community. Now this case is another indication of how power struggles are at work throughout the world and throughout history, and therefore it is important to understand conflicts as they arise and how to get to a successful resolve. A few history in this crisis goes back to World War II. I had no idea it was that long or wide in scope, but in World War II, 1944, Stalin deported many residents of Chechen to Central Asia and to Siberia. The context of the deportation and hostility towards the Chechen is important because Stalin perceived the threat to be a national threat by external powers to manipulate the internal ethnic groups. Therefore, Stalin's reaction was very brutal. Stalin believed the Chechens would welcome Nazi Germany in return for an independent Chechen. So apparently there was some paranoia going on in his mind. So therefore he destroyed Chechen's economy, left armed but unemployed Chechen because a war followed. It was a brutal war. Many atrocities committed by the Russian troops. They were radicalized against the state of Chechen. The Soviet-Afghan War had attracted many Islam militants to dwell in Russia, and as a result, Chechen and neighboring Dagestan, emboldened because the area was free of Russian military. Now, Russia, or former Soviet Union, never accepted Chechnya as a separate republic and was determined to encourage others to do so. Russia also believed that the region should not be independent, as this would undermine the territorial integrity. Stalin believed that after the fall of the Soviet Union, that if Chechen were to become independent, then that would only set the stage for other regions to become independent, and so he did not want that. Therefore, he was trying to suppress freedom. The Chechen desire for independence is perfectly understood. An ethnic group, they had been mistreated by the Soviet regime and the Russian Empire before the fall of the Union, and perhaps worse than any other group for whatever reason. I'm not so sure, but they were just treated more unfairly. The conflict of an Islamic democracy versus Islamic militancy within Chechnya is further complicated by Russia's desire to prevent secession. Currently, Chechen's leader is Ramzan Kadyrov, and he's a pro-Russian leader who is noted by many NGOs to be an abuser of human rights, a suppressor of free speech, anti-democracy, and he is just for Russia, which is not a bad thing, but the methods in which he employs, they aren't conducive towards resolving any form of conflict. And so you have a people living, whether they're living in fear or in true submission, we don't know, but many suspect that it is because he is very brutal to anyone that speaks anti-Russia or anti-against him. Now, a discussion of critical factors that contributes to a successful resolution of a conflict. First, I want to talk about reconciliation, because in this crisis there has to be reconciliation. The state to the people to the state. No, Ramsbotham in his literature defined reconciliation as restoring broken relationships and learning to live non-violently with radical differences. This is the ultimate goal of conflict resolution. We understand the long history that the state has with this region, conflicts, war, but sooner or later someone should resolve to live in peace, because we're in 2016, we're trying to move to a democratic world, and suppressing or violating human rights is really unacceptable in the international community. Because after a decade of unsuccessful fighting for independence, the autonomous region is now firmly under the control of a, as we said earlier, pro-Russian appointed leader. Two of the four dimensions of reconciliation, as Ramsbotham identified in his literature, are bridging opposites and reconstituting relations as applicable to understanding successful resolution to the conflict. And so of the four dimensions that he mentioned in his book, only two are applicable to this crisis. For healing to take place, the people of Chechen will have to deal with the past trauma and atrocity that they experienced under the rule of pro-Russian leadership. They're going to have to say, okay, yes, we deal with it. This happened. However, how can we move forward? Because it will not be an independent state. It's going to always be a region that falls under Russia, because Russia is not going to let it go. Even though they've had wars and both sides have been defeated, many loss of lives, they're going to have to accept, okay, here we are, the part of Russia. How can we bridge the gap for healing to take place? And then the state will have to determine, okay, how can we eliminate repressive ways so our citizens can bloom and be healed? We have to remove all barriers that hinder effective peace building, and now this falls to the responsibility of the state to do that. All right, so to conclude on the summation that draws general conclusions about this topic, one, we're going to need the help of the international community, and that's said we on behalf of the region. I'm not from that region, but we're going to need the help of the international community to hopefully help resolve and bridge a peaceful conflict, to make it where it can become a democratic region, where people have freedom of speech, people can freedom of the press, and just really live in a civilized manner. There is a paragraph that Ramsbotham writes in his literature that I would like to read to draw on general conclusions about this topic. And this paragraph fits perfectly into this whole situation and to hopefully bring about a conflict resolution. This is a world in which the conflict settlement dimension of conflict resolution is forefronted. The concepts, methodologies, and practices of conflict settlement, ranging from diplomacy through negotiation and mediation to various forms of institutional accommodation, can be seen to be integral to the whole enterprise of preserving order and allowing space for communities to develop in the way they choose, within their overarching framework of the International Society of States. Within this framework, the conflict settlement approach provides the essential capacity for managing unavoidable deep conflicts non-violently. And so the state, the onus of responsibility is on the state to ensure that they can create a framework so that a people can prosper, a people can live in peace, a people can live successfully under the mantra of conflict resolution. Well, that's all the time I have. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for listening. I personally never knew this conflict existed until I got to do this research, and I will admit that I'm bothered by it, just a little bit. I am bothered. For so long, there has to be a give. There has to be principles that can be employed by the state to have people live in freedom. Thank you all. Again, my name is Rudolph Richards. I'm a student with AMU, American Military University, and this is the class Conflict Analysis and Resolution, and we discussed in just very briefly the topic of the Chechen crisis. Thank you.